guys, welcome to this video. What I'm going to do here is I was asked to put together a quick tutorial on how to use your graphing calculator's TI-84 in order to graph a scatter plot and then use the calculator to find a line of regression for that data set and then use the line of regression to predict a future event. Here's the way that this program is going to work. What you see over here is hopefully what looks exactly like your TI-84 calculator. Now, as I make selections, as I select buttons as we go through this problem, the button will be highlighted in red. That way you'll know that that is the button I have selected, and hopefully it'll help you find it on your calculator much easier. In addition to highlighting the button that I have selected, it will also show you what your calculator screen should look like if you have selected the correct button, right? So that way everything over here should look exactly like it does on your calculator. One other thing that this program is going to do for us as I go through and select buttons, it will put each button selection in sequential order over here on this side, so that if you ever get lost or you'd like to repeat this for another problem, you can just simply look at the order in which we selected the buttons, and hopefully that'll help you work your way through another button. So just to quickly review, when I select a button, it'll highlight it in red. That'll help you find it, and then it should show you what your calculator screen will look like when that proper button is selected. We're going to go ahead and do the problem out of Chapter 2, Section 5 notes, dealing with the average life expectancy of someone living in the United States over certain consecutive years. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, what you guys are going to need to do in order to do these problems is first, all of the data that's given to you will need to be entered into your calculator. Where do you put the data? Well, we're going to put it in under our Stat menu. So go ahead and select Stat, which should be highlighted in red. Once you have found your Stat menu, we are going to edit our lists. In order to do that, you just need to simply select Enter because Edit is already highlighted. Select Enter, and it should open up a screen that looks like this on your calculator where you have several lists. We're only going to use two of the lists, L1 and L2. Now, your calculator works just like Excel. Whatever data points are entered into L1 will go on the independent axis or the x-axis. Whatever is put into L2 in the second column will be the dependent variable and will be graphed on the y-axis. Since we're talking about the average life expectancy of someone living in the United States over 6 consecutive years, years will be the independent, life expectancy will be the dependent. So let's go ahead and enter our years. My first year is 1980. Enter to enter that data point into my list. The next one is 1983. Select Enter to enter that into your list, and so on. 1990, 1995, 2000, and 2006. Now that I've entered the years into my calculator in the first column, in order to get to the second column to enter the average life expectancy, I'll simply use my directional arrows to move my highlighter into the second column. Now I will enter the life expectancy for the average person in the United States during these years. 73.7 years. Enter to put that data point into your graph, and so on. 74.6, 75.4, 75.8, 76.8, and 77.7. Now that I have entered all of my data into my calculator, I'm ready to graph. Now, in order to graph a scatter plot, you will first need to turn the scatter plot on. Your calculator has the ability to either graph an equation or a scatter plot. And we need to make sure that we have scatter plot selected. So you're going to hit your blue second button, which is now highlighted in red. After hitting the second button, you will hit y equals, which is highlighted in red. And you'll notice that the first option highlighted, plot 1, is turned off. We need to turn it on. We want our calculator to graph a scatter plot. Since plot 1 is already highlighted, simply select Enter. And your cursor should be flashing on the word on. Hit Enter again to highlight on. You have now turned on the scatter plot. In order to graph the data points that we just entered, we're going to head and hit Graph, which is now highlighted in red. Hopefully, what you notice is that your screen is empty. There are no data points entered. And that's because right now your calculator is looking at 0, 0 as the origin and going plus 10 and minus 10 in either direction. But if you remember the data points that we entered, my x values start at the year 1980. And I'm currently looking at x values from 0 to a positive 10. But my first value doesn't show up until 1980, which means I'm looking in the wrong spot. Similarly, on the y-axis, I'm looking at y equals 0 to y equals a positive 10. But my smallest average life expectancy was a 73.7, which means I'm looking in the wrong spot. So what we need to do is tell our calculator where to look. And to do that, you need to adjust your window, which is now highlighted in red. I need to first adjust the x-axis. My lowest year was 1980. I need to go below that. 1975 might be a good choice. Arrow down to highlight X max. Well, my max year was 2006. I need to go above that. 2010 would probably be a good choice. Arrow down. You now have X scale highlighted. What you now have is the option to change your scale. At the moment, your calculator is going to go by a scale of 1, which means every hash mark represents 1 year. 1975, 1976, 1977, 1978, and so on. But since I need to go from 1975 to the year 2010, which is a rather large span, it might make more sense if my scale is by 5s, which means then that each hash mark would represent 5 years. So 1975, 1980, 1985, 1990, and so on. Arrow down, Y min. This is where I'm going to adjust my y-axis. My smallest life expectancy was 73.7. I need to go below that. 70 might be a good choice. Arrow down again. Y max. Well, my top life expectancy was 77.7. I need to go above that. 80 would probably be a good choice. Since I'm going from 70 to 80, which is only 10 units anyway, I don't see any need to change my Y scale from 1. You certainly could if you would like to, but I don't think it's necessary in this case. I will now go ahead and hit Graph once again, and what I'm hoping is now that I have changed my window, all of my data points will show up. I select Graph, which is highlighted in red, And there's my data points. Once you've graphed the data points, what you now need to do is find the line of regression. So let's go ahead and do that. And here's where you'll find it. You need to go back into Stat, which is highlighted in red. But now we're no longer going to edit. I've already put in the data that I wanted to graph. What I now am going to do is calculate a line of regression, which means at the top of my screen, instead of edit being highlighted, calculate needs to be highlighted, which will require me to use my directional arrows to move my highlight over to calculate. Now that I'm in the calculate menu, option number 4 says line regression. Go ahead and select option number 4 by either arrowing down until 4 is highlighted, or you could simply select the button with the number 4 on it. It'll do the exact same thing. On your calculator, your screen may look slightly different than mine at this point. If your calculator gives you a whole bunch of information, and then about halfway down the screen you'll see the word calculate. Continue to hit enter until calculate is highlighted, and then hit enter one more time, and you will get a screen that looks just like mine. This is your line of regression, and I will ask you for it on the test. Write down everything you see on this screen. Please notice that the line is in slope-intercept form, y equals ax plus b. Your calculator has given you the slope, a, and the y-intercept, b. Once again, you will need to write down all of this information. Now that I have found my line of regression, we can graph it. Select the y equals button, now highlighted in red. This is your equation editor. This is where we will add our line of regression for our calculator to graph. In order to do that, you will select variance, abbreviated by VARS, highlighted in red. You will select option number 5 by either arrowing down until 5 is highlighted, or simply selecting the button with a 5 on it. You want to select statistics. We are going to graph an equation. So at the top of your screen, you will need to arrow over to the right until equation, EQ, is highlighted. Option number 1 will be your line of regression. Select enter. Or select number 1. This will enter your line of regression. Copy and paste your line of regression into your equation editor. Select graph to graph both your data points, your scatter plot, and your line of regression. Finally, you'll be asked to predict a future event using your line of regression. For the problem I have given you in the notes, you're asked to predict the average life expectancy in the year 2025. Select clear. Don't panic. You've not lost all of your data. I promise it's still there. If you would like to reassure yourself of this, simply select graph again, and you'll find that your graph is still there. All you have done by selecting clear is you have taken yourself to the area in your calculator where you can now perform arithmetic operations. my line of regression was y equals mx plus b, a x plus b in your calculator. You've written those values down, and now we will simply enter them. My a was 0.14410187767. The year is 2025. I will enter that for my x value. Make sure that you put 2025 in parentheses so that your calculator performs the order of operations correctly. My b was a negative 211 211.432305.6. Select Enter. Your calculate will quickly chug out an answer of 80.4 years if you round to the nearest tenth place. 80.4 years is your prediction of the average life expectancy of an American living in the United States in the year 2025. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys next time.